Thank you again for joining us. We're happy you're here with us today as we discuss Fiscal Year 2020 and Forward Awards performance measures. I am Jill Ruggiero, one of 2 training and technical assistance specialists with the OJJDP performance management team. I'm actually joined by several of my colleagues this afternoon, but those you may hear from today are Ann Schiff, our task lead, Erin Feely, the other training and technical assistance specialist, and Shanice Johnson, our help desk support specialist. Just a brief reminder of why performance measures are so important. And then, of course, an overview of Fiscal Year 2020 and forward performance measures. We'll be introducing a new medication-assisted treatment performance measure that is applicable to some, but not all of the programs who may be in attendance today. And then we'll go over a few important reporting reminders. At the end of the session, everyone will remember and, of course, we're recognizing that this may be a refresher for some, but to remember why performance measures are so important, which is ultimately because they help OJJDP accomplish its overall mission, and importantly, help create evidence-based policy and program sustainability. And then also to understand your program's performance measures and the usefulness of the questions and definitions document in collecting and reporting the data that's sought. And also to know if the MAP measure is assigned to your program, understand what that measure is, if so, and then finally be able to easily find support and resources. So I turn it over to Erin Feely so she can introduce herself and jump right into the performance measures overview. Erin?
As Jill mentioned, I'm the other training and technical assistance specialist providing contractor support to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, specifically around performance measures, the PMT, and kind of all things performance management. So I'm going to kind of take the next 2 sections or so and kind of do an overview of the fiscal year 2020 and forward performance measures. I do want to acknowledge for many of you who may have had previous awards, OJJDP may have reported in the PMT system. These measures for FY20 and forward, they are ones that were launched just last year. So acknowledging that that is a bit of a change for you. And this is kind of why we're doing the overview, is to kind of go over what those measures look like, how to read the documents that you've been sent, and as Jill mentioned, go over the resources and how we can help you in the future, because we're here, we want questions, we want open communication. It'll definitely help your data entry as well as our data analysis. By now, hopefully, documents that are on the screen look familiar to everyone. The PMT help desk did send out copies of these as awards went active, and this is kind of to give you a sense, just a visual of what the documents that you should be using look like. On this screenshot, you'll notice that there are 3 columns. The first column there will have a question. For example, and we'll be talking about this quite a bit, number of individuals served. So that's the actual question. The center column is going to have some sort of relevant definition or guidance, something to help you figure out how you are interpreting what a program means by individuals served. Third column, and that's going to say questions. Those are the questions that you are going to see, the grant award administrator is going to see in JustGrants. Those are the data points that you're going to be collecting, monitoring, and eventually reporting. So just as a quick side note, for those of you who hopefully have copies of the definition and questions documents, as Jill mentioned, there is a new medicated assisted treatment performance measure, which we will talk about in an upcoming section of the presentation today. That measure is very new, so it's not currently on the version of the document that you have. We are still in the process of updating these documents, and we'll get them reposted to the website. We'll send them back out to you. So we'll talk about it more, but please, don't worry. Make sure that everyone gets an updated copy of the definition and questions document. In your slides, we're also going to talk a little bit more about just grants, but what I really want to drive home here is that you need to understand the performance measures on these documents first. No reporting system is going to tell you what data code to collect or how to define individuals served or how to define, say, protective factors. That's all part of your performance management plan. So as you may have heard us say in some other trainings, the performance management plan is a highly suggested and recommended plan for you to put together. It's not required. It's a really good part of strategic planning for awards. I do also want to make one note. You may see on these definition and questions documents something where it will say percentage. And I used to be a grantee, and this was something that I wish I had known. You don't need to calculate the percentage. My team is going to do that. So don't worry about it. Just kind of stay focused on the question column, which is that third column, and that'll help you get your collection going. So I know that you are reporting directly into Just Grants, so what I wanted to do is just take a little snippet of the and questions document that we've been talking about and kind of show you how it matches up to what the grant award administrator is going to see in Just Grants. So as you can see, there's the question, the individual served, and then 1A, 1B, and 1C. That's what you're going to see when you log into Just Grants. So, and there'll be no percentages. Our teams will be calculating that. Don't worry about it. And please, as you're going through this, again, make sure that you ask your questions. Denise has posted our contact information, and we'll be happy to set up support calls with you, and we can kind of go through each of these measures if you have questions about how they're relating to your award goals and objectives. The thing I want to point out about the definition and questions document is that there are different headers. These headers are very important because they're going to tell you things about questions you're answering and the types of data that you're going to collect. So, for example, on the screenshot here, it's just an example. We have, one solicitation for internet crimes against children, and for that one, there are going to be specific measures that are for the task forces, and then there are going to be specific for the training and technical assistance provider. That up because the training and technical assistance provider one, that does come up on a lot of different definition and questions documents, as there's things like protective factors and program outcomes. So just take a note of those because that'll help you, along with the definition, really understand what you are reporting on. And don't worry, we're going to talk a bit more about training and technical assistance in some future slides. Another quick tip to think about is as you're looking at especially the number of individuals served, you want to focus on words such as new or carried over. New is going to mean all of those individuals who maybe entered or started your program during the activity period. That activity period, that's the 6 months that kind of covers what you're reporting on. So for example, in July of 2022, your activity period is January 1st to June 30th, 2022. So the other piece that you want to keep an eye out for is the word carried over. This means individuals who may have been continuing with the program from a prior activity period. Sometimes we'll call them new versus returning clients. So you really want to make sure that you are differentiating who is a kind of a new client from who is being carried over from a previous activity period, that you want to make sure that you're bringing into your performance reporting all of the individuals that you're serving. Thing you may have noticed on the definition and questions document is these different types of headers where you're going to see output and outcome and overall and multi-program. So I wanted to take a second just to kind of talk about this because, again, for the fiscal year 20 and forward performance measures, definitely something that's new. So the output measures, these are kind of those sort of product things. They're countable products and services that your program produces. And, you know, for example, that may be the number of trainings conducted, the number of technical assistance requests. Maybe you have produced a survey or a study. Individual serve does actually fall under output as well. These are kind of those longer measures that it can take to really gather data on, to really look at a change in someone's knowledge, attitude, skill, or behavior that's hopefully occurring within the course of the program. The other thing that you're going to see, words overall and multi-program measures, I wanted to call these out because those are going to be performance measures that are assigned to your award, say a juvenile drug court, but those could also be the same performance measures that are assigned to children exposed to violence or a lot of different types of other programs. So those definitions that you're going to see are going to be very broad, and they're going to be broad on purpose because they are assigned to so many different types of solicitations. So that means that those are the ones you're going to want to focus on to say, what does this mean to my program? How am I defining what service is? How do I define when someone exits or leaves service? These are going to be very important for you to have as part of your performance management plan. The official definitions that we have been sharing. This is a common question that has been coming into the help desk around what do you mean by overall and what do you mean by program specific. So the last one, program specific, those may be performance measures that you're going to see that are aligning to just a very few solicitations. They're going to be very specific data points in terms of a type of population or very particular funded activity or very particular desired result. And again, these are unique outputs and outcomes that are just going to be for a very small group, and they'll be different from solicitation to solicitation. Last tip on the definition and questions document, again, going back to some of those headers that I was talking about and how they can kind of change the data that you are reporting, which of course is going to come from your data collection systems. So I really do want to keep an eye on these because for some of you, questions may shift. So you may go from on kind of every individual that's received service to just maybe an adult, not family members. Other sections may be asking for just youth served. So definitely do keep an eye out for those. And if you're unsure of why or the shift, again, please reach out to the help desk. We'd be happy to talk that through with you. Questions early and often, they will definitely make your reporting a lot easier. I'm going to touch on training and technical assistance a little bit because, again, this is another very common question that has come in through the help desk. And we do have on our definition and questions document very specific performance measures that are under the header for a training and technical assistance provider. But the very similar looking, I said duplicate, performance measures for grantees as well. Guess what? They're not duplicates. They are actually the same performance measure, but we're asking for data from either a training and technical assistance provider or you as the grantee, because we do want to know about any sort of training that you as the grantee are providing. Now, that could be to your staff, that could be to your volunteers, that could be to the local community, you know, kind of a wide variety of things. And we do want to maybe track not only who you're providing training to, but we're also going to want some examples of that specific population. So for example, you may want to say, you know, new staff being trained on the program, You can also, police, prosecutors, teachers, community members. There is going to be no pick list in grants for the population trained. That is going to be an open text field that then you can summarize who actually was attending the trainings that you are putting on. So I just want to take a time to note that the training and technical assistance questions, yes, they're there for your TA providers, but they're also there for grantees. We really do want to know about the type of work that you are doing. Those of you who may have had OJJDP award from FY17 through 19, you may have gotten what we call a validation email that came from the PMT help desk. And that may have been some questions around some data that you reported. For those of you who are newer grantees, I also want to introduce you to the concept as well, because this is something that our team is going to continue to do, but this is also something that you as a grantee can do before you submit your performance report. Validation or it's a way for you to monitor what you're reporting and making sure that things kind of line up in terms of the users individuals served, lines up with the services that are provided. So where does this all fit within the concept of performance management? Well, when we talk about performance management, the first piece that we talk about is always going to be data collection, really on you as the grantee to do. However you're going to choose to do that, WIMs or files, that is going to be your system. One in your team is hopefully going to contribute to. So you're going to collect that data, you're going to compile it. You're going to look at every 6 months some totals for how many individuals were trained or how many received intervention or prevention services. You're also going to take time within your performance management plan to define those things like what does it mean to leave or exit service? What does service mean? Because it's going to mean something very different to court than it's going to mean to an opioid affected youth program. Got to pay attention to what that means for your program. When we get up to the reporting period, you're going to look back at that activity period for the previous 6 months, going to pull your numbers together, going to report those numbers into Just Grants. Your grant manager is going to review it. If they have any questions, they'll let you know. And what happens is once you submit that report, as I said, our team is going to kind of do a check, what we call a validation on the data that is submitted. And if we have any questions, we'll kind of let you know. So what I want to do in these next couple of slides is kind of describe the process of what my team does, of how we perform validations on the data that you submit. This is something that you can do as well. These steps are really important because they help create confidence in the data that OJJDP collects from all grantees and puts together data calls that come from the President or Congress or the general public. And these also affect the data reports that you may be seeing on the website as well, where it talks about kind of the overall performance of juvenile drug court. Data comes from your performance measures that are aggregated together with all grantees. So these steps are really what helps create confidence in that data. I'm going to use what is our kind of key measure, and it is considered, as I mentioned, an overall measure. So this is one that is assigned to many, many, many different solicitations, and many, many different types of grantees are going to be answering this individual served performance measure. Then one that you're going to look for, it's in question one, it's not, but really individuals served. There's going to be a number of data points in that third column. We're going to ask you for the number of children ages 0 to 10 who were new or carried over. The same type of question will be repeated for other age groups as well as family members or other individuals served. What you want to do to start your validation look at all of the numbers that you have in a served question and add them together. That's going to be your reference point. I can tell you when I was a grantee, I always filled that question out first, and then I totaled up the number that was in that served, and I wrote the number down on a little sticky note, and I put it up on my computer as I did the rest of the report, because then it was something that I could refer back to say, okay, are the other measures, are they adding up, or is everything lining up correctly? So what do I mean by is everything lining up correctly? Let's go a little further into it. So mentioning about we've got all of those different data points, and that can be, for example, children, youth, and young adults. That can be A through F. Family members are usually G through J, and that's kind of what I mean by you're going to add up all of those, so be A through J. Take that total, and then what you're going to do is we're going to see in the next few slides, you're going to make sure that the services that you report on are going to be often less than or equal to the number of individuals served. That's validation. So I'll say that again. Use your total of individuals served to make sure that measures that you report on are less than or to the number of individuals served. So I also want to bring this up because this is something that grant award administrators will see in the Just Grant system. This is a little snapshot of what things look like in Just Grants. So this is an example that we pulled out of the family-based alternative sentencing performance measures. And what you can see here is 25A numbered. Well, where did we get that number? We got it from that first question, total number of individuals served. I knew that that was 10. So in 25A, where it says number of individuals served again, I'm going to put in a 10. Then when we look at 25B, as the number of individuals adjudicated for a first-time delinquency offense, I need to make sure that 5B is less than or equal to 25A. What you can see on this screenshot is that within the brackets there, Just Grants is going to kind of prompt you to do that and give you an idea of what the numbers look like. Another place that we do use validations is around the protective factors. That's again, protective factors is something desk has received quite a lot of questions about, and this is a perfect place for you to kind of practice those validations and do a check. Say, okay, how many individuals did my program serve that I'm reporting? That individual served question. Then when I get down to, for example, number of individuals receiving esteem services, that number of individuals who receive those services must be less than or equal to all individuals served in just that activity period. So this is an example of eligible individuals who exhibited improved self-esteem services. Now the number of this particular question is going to be different on different questions documents, but the question itself is still the same. The A and the B are still going to be the same words that you'll see on those documents and in Just Grants. So A is going to be individuals who received services to improve self-esteem. Going to be your validation point. At less than or equal to individuals served. Going to look at B, those who may have exhibited improved self-esteem services. Improved self-esteem, excuse me. So then you want to make sure that number that you put into B is less than or equal to A. Hopefully things are kind of starting to see how they fit together. And this is something, again, that our team does when we receive your data. It's served, provided, and who exhibited. Talking about protective factors, I did want to take a moment to kind of talk a little bit about the guidance around that, because again, it's a question that we've been hearing quite a bit about at the help desk. So performance measures like these are designed to help OJJDP understand the impact on eligible individuals served by a program. Protective factors really just mean a positive change in behavior. So tracking this data as you go along can be interesting. It can help you energize both yourself as well as your program manager to see what that progress can look like, as well as allowing opportunities to notice any sorts of challenges or changes and use that performance measure data to really tackle those changes and see how things are going. So what you want to make sure that you're doing is look over that list of protective factors and try to find at least one that you can report on or make a plan to report on in the future. If you're tracking multiple protective factors based on the goals and objectives of your award, report on those multiple protective factors consistently. Bottom line is you really do want to look at that list and see which ones potentially align to the goals of your program. You may need to report 0 in some of the protective factor lines as well as some of the other measures because Just Grants does require an answer to every single question. Reporting a 0 to those that do not align to your program goals, and that's okay. At the end of the question set in Just Grants, there is a place where you can make a note of that to say we reported 0 for improved parent and caregiver relationship because that does not align to our program goals. Definitely do. Please let us know through the Just Grants any that you're having a challenge with putting data on. To cover, and don't worry, we've got question and answer coming up soon, but as we mentioned, there is a new performance measure that is coming up that you'll see in Just Grants in July. So with that, I would like to pass this over to Jill, who's going to tell you a little bit more about it.
Before I jump into that, I would like to acknowledge, as Erin just said, we fully recognize that we've just covered a lot of information. And so I would like to just remind everyone that you will have a copy of this presentation as a resource. We'll send it out via email, so you'll have that in front of you as a resource. The definitions and questions documents are really, really crucial to also be using as a resource. I would pull those first before anything else and maybe use them in conjunction with some training. The training recording will be posted to the website. We are always here, so I don't want folks to fret. We are introducing today, for most of you, this is going to be the first time you've heard about this new performance measure. Erin just talked a lot about validation. So I just want to remind everyone, we recognize there's a lot of information. Reporting period is coming up. We're here, so don't fret. But this new performance measure is medication-assisted treatment, and it's been recently added for some programs. So I'm going to go over which programs are affected momentarily. But since it is a recent change, most of you, like I said, are hearing about it for the first time right now. So we expect questions. It's a pretty straightforward measure, though, so it's nothing too complicated. So don't let it stress you out. It's pretty straightforward. And like Erin said earlier, the questions and definitions documents have not all been updated yet to reflect this new measure. There is one program affected by the new measure who does have a current questions and definitions document, which we'll talk about. But as you reference your questions and definitions document, if you don't see it, that does not mean it doesn't apply to you. You will see it in Just Grants when you go to do your report if you are one of these next listed programs. So if you can, yep, thank you. So who reports on the new medication-assisted treatment performance measure? The Family-Based Alternative Sentencing Solicitation, Family Treatment Court Program. I know some of you in attendance, I saw in the chat, are from Family Treatment Court Program, Juvenile Drug Court, Juvenile Justice Mental Health Collaboration, Opioid Affected Youth, and coordinated tribal assistance, which is both juvenile healing to wellness courts and tribal youth programs. So right now, those are the only programs who are going to see the new added medication-assisted treatment performance measure. What is changing for July 22? The new measure, again, we talk a little bit, and you'll see in the questions and definitions document, sometimes you'll see the terminology percentage. We do not expect the grantees to calculate the percentage. That is for informational purposes on that document. You will not be asked for a percentage when you go to Just Grants. You'll be asked for whole numbers. So what exactly is the measure? What is the change? What you see on the screen is the actual measure. Like I said, it's a very straightforward question. The number of total substance use disorder treatment programs, you'll enter a number there, and then the number of substance use disorder treatment programs that provide medication-assisted treatment. Excuse me, you should report the totals for active programs during the activity period supported with OJJDP funds. The number of substance use disorder treatment programs that provide medication-assisted treatment, we recognize that oftentimes programs that are serving our youth must be providing medication-assisted treatment. So if your answer to that question is 0, that is completely understandable and somewhat expected. So measure, why is it changing? Why are they changing now? Just a little bit of background. It's a Department of Justice-wide performance measure. So it's not just for OJJDP solicitations and programs, but the Department of Justice is looking at medication-assisted treatment across offices. And it hopes to measure treatment programs and services that utilize medication-assisted treatment across offices, across programs, and across grantees. A little kind of summary of the guidance on the medication-assisted treatment measure. Again, you should see the new measure when you go to report in your July 2022 Just Grants report. If you are using the definitions and questions documents, you will need to add that measure in. So if that is your go-to kind of reference, make sure you add that measure in so that you don't forget about it as you're collecting data. But again, it's a straightforward question. Do you provide medication-assisted treatment? And the number of programs that do. Make sure you share the new medication-assisted treatment with your program team. And we're going to throw out another caveat because as though things aren't changing frequently enough, we'll just send out the warning that it's possible that in January 2023, you might be asked for a little bit more detail on the measure, such as the actual number of individuals served. Again, it will be an Office of Justice Programs guidance that will be communicated if and when further information is available on that. But we promise to communicate any of those changes to your grant managers and to the grantees when and if further guidance is available. And then don't forget that the narrative report, that what we refer to and what you'll see in Just Grants as the PNQ, planning questions, you can utilize that and should utilize that to talk about if you engaged in planning activity regarding collection of the new measure, utilize that narrative report for sure. And again, just one last reminder, it's an overall Department of Justice measure. So we do recognize and realize that not many juvenile focused programs are using that. We're still need to track it. So if the answer is 0, 0 is okay. Just you need to make sure to report the answer. So switch gears just a little bit, and I promise we will leave time for questions. I'm certain, and I see already a couple coming in the chat. We're certain that we're going to get questions on the new measure. We will leave time to address as many as we can. And again, we'll send out some additional guidance after the session. But for the next few moments, I'd like to just go over a couple of reporting tips that we think are important and helpful. So you for your 2020 and forward awards, again, we recognize some of you may have older awards and this guidance is not applicable to those. But for your 2020 and forward awards, you'll be going into Just Grants to complete your report. You should all see, with the exception of just a few programs that we'll talk about momentarily, you should all see 2 line items in Just Grants. One that's referred to as OJJDP PNQ, and that is the narrative report where you have the opportunity to describe your program successes, your challenges, amongst other details in narrative form. And then the second line item will be the quantitative data, the actual performance measures that we spend so much time talking about and stressing how important they are. Those are the data points that are on the questions and definitions document. With the exception of a few programs, you should see both line items. You should make sure that you complete both of those reports before submitting. And then if you only see one, that first PNQ, that could be because you're one of the programs that are affected by a subrecipient type of reporting that we're going to talk about momentarily. So you should all, with the exception of the few programs, see 2 line items in Just Grants. And so a couple of other tips in terms of Just Grants. Look for different types of questions. So the progress report narrative and performance measures. Progress report narrative is the qualitative data. The quantitative data are the performance measures. They're going to be asking for different types of information. So the performance measures data are looking for numbers, sometimes checkboxes. The narrative qualitative data is going to allow you to provide information in narrative form. Performance measures should always be entered in as a single whole number, no decimal or negative. And again, we've mentioned a couple times, but sometimes it's cause for some questions that we get at the help desk about the percentage. When you see percentage on the questions and definitions document, it's usually related to a data point that you've entered. It is related to a data point that you've entered a whole number for. You will not be asked to calculate percentages. The performance measure questions, data points may require answers and then generate an error message if skipped. So make sure you read the text in red as it's most likely an error message and not a system problem. Sometimes we get calls at the help desk about those error messages that aren't really an issue that we can fix. It's just some question or data point that you did not answer. So just always go back to the error message. You can enter 0 if that's the answer, but something must be entered in those questions. Thank you. So as I mentioned, there are a few programs that will report subrecipient data via an Excel spreadsheet. Again, we're fully prepared that this is going to generate quite a few questions. We'll go through it, kind of briefly here, let you know what programs are affected, and then, of course, we are available to answer any questions either this afternoon in this session or at a follow-up time. We're always available for support sessions through the help desk. So this kind of subrecipient reporting guidance is just a functionality, temporary functionality, reporting functionality in Just Grants as of today. So until we are able to have the larger programs report all of their subrecipient data into Just Grants, we are asking that they report it via an Excel document that we have created, and we will share with all of you. The programs that are affected are Title II, Second Chance Act Reentry, Second Chance Act Children of Incarcerated Parents, and Mentoring. Any other programs that are in attendance right now that have subrecipients but are not on this list that you see in front of you will continue to report your prime and your subrecipient data aggregated into Just Grants. You do not need to use this Excel document unless you are Title II, SCA reentry, SCA children of incarcerated parents, or mentoring. And this is going to be in place until further notice. And of course, the performance management team will alert you if and when that changes. The other piece of the Excel spreadsheet that we're referring to, it's important to note, will not contain all of the performance measures. So for example, if your program has 50 data points on your questions and definitions document, you will not see 50 data points on the Excel document. We had to choose just a few key performance measures. Those were chosen, for example, measures that track extremely useful data points for the president's budget. The templates will be uniform for mentoring and SCA, the two programs. We will send them to grant award administrators. It's very simple and very user-friendly. So again, don't fret. It is self-explanatory, but we're here to walk you through anything that you need support on. But on the Excel spreadsheet, we even have the corresponding question number on the question and definition document in the columns in Excel. So we've put all of the information in there that you should need. But again, we're here. We can help with any questions you might have. So just quickly to wrap up, we know we just gave you a lot of information. There's a lot to process today. Good time to just go through a couple of the key takeaways. Just remember to review and validate your data before submitting a report. Make sure you read and understand your program's assigned performance measures from the questions and definitions documents. Remember that most questions in Just Grants, as you're completing your performance report, ask for a number, although some are yes or no or text fields. Of course, remember to use the questions and definitions document for guidance. That's really, really important and very helpful. Our grantees who use that and use that document religiously tend to have far less confusion by using that document. Also remember that there is a new medication-assisted treatment measure that you will see in July 2022 for those solicitations that we mentioned. And there is also a subrecipient reporting Excel spreadsheet for mentoring and Second Chance Act grantees. All other grantees that are not on that list should continue to aggregate their prime and subrecipient data.